Hey everyone, Sycra here, and I was asked to do a video on facial proportions, which I've already done before. Someone thought it might be a good idea for me to redo it, but instead I thought it might be more helpful if I just covered common mistakes that I see people doing when drawing the face. And maybe I'll touch on the proportions real quick, so let's just say I'm going to draw a head. Usually start with like this circle shape that represents a cranium, and then a straight line for the center of the face, and I get the jaw in, and it's a shape like this. Divide this in half, and that'll roughly be where the eyes go, and then from the eyes to the chin, in half again is the nose, in half again, and a little bit higher than half would be the mouth. And then I'll place the eye sockets here and get the eyebrows a bit higher than that. And then if I'm doing a guy, I get the hairline maybe halfway or above, and if it's a girl, usually above halfway from the top to the eyes is where the hairline is, and that's the basic proportion. And then the ears rather go from the bottom of the nose to the top of the eyebrows, and it's not like, okay, so the bottom of the ear is here, right? Or the bottom of the nose is like here, and the top of the eyebrows is here. It's not that big. What it is if you imagine the line curves around a bit like that, it's roughly in this area. So okay, so that's basic proportions. Fine. But what I find people have difficulty with are things like making the eyes the same size, for instance. And the way I deal with that is this, to start with the eye sockets. And I usually block in circle-y shapes like this, but I sometimes do more triangular shapes like this to represent the eye sockets. And so before I get the eyes in, I get the sockets in, and this helps me with size placement because the sockets of the eye has to fit within the face, right? And then the eye has to fit within the socket. And the eyebrows, for guys, they tend to hug the ridge of the eye socket more, so something like this. And for girls, it tends to go a bit higher, so it hits this line that I established before. But I don't know if it's so important to actually memorize. Well, it's sort of important to memorize all these lines, but I think it's better to just draw a lot and get a sense of it, so that you can experiment with placing, like, okay, place the eyebrows here, what does that look like? Okay, what if I place the eyebrows here, what does that look like? So I usually have the eyebrows for guys, again, hugging the top of that eye socket. And what I like to do is I tend to extend the eye socket. So, okay, so this is the eye socket right here, right? And then I tend to go around and treat the eyebrow as if it's following some kind of rhythm that's in line with the eye socket. And if you look at eyes, it kind of is that way, where, let me just do a quick eye. So this is where the nose would be here. And what I'm talking about is this rhythm. See, around here, it comes up, and then it goes around and like this. So you have this rhythm that the eye socket follows. And for me and my style, I sort of exaggerate that by actually doing this. Like, I'll create this line, and that's my own personal, I guess it's like my signature. I don't see anyone else doing it, and it's sort of what I started doing to just make this my own, I guess. But anyway, even if you don't do this, you can erase that after because it doesn't necessarily connect, but it doesn't connect as defined as I have it in my works. But it is something that you can use that rhythm to get the end of the eye and then bring it into the eyebrow. And so, yeah, so you've got that, and just erase this and redo it. So then when you have the eye socket in, you can draw very lightly, you can draw an eyeball and then create the eye within that. Now for the eye, it tends to be a few lines. It's, let's see. Okay, so for this one, right? You've got 3 lines and then 2 lines or 1 line. You've got this line, right? 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And then the configuration of these, yeah, I guess 4 lines. The configuration of these can change a lot, but they're usually present. So you could have an eye that's like this, or an eye that's maybe more like this. But you still get these same shapes, and the nose is on this side. So now how do you make sure the other eye is the same? Well, the way I do it is I just see these points and I draw a line straight across. So to be able to do this, you need to be comfortable with drawing straight lines across. And this is something you can practice. And the way you practice it is you just have a page and you draw the horizontal line and you try and draw lines in between and try and keep them parallel. And with practice, you can get pretty good at this. And for me, I'm using my arm movement. If I was just using my fingers and I was drawing, it would look something like this. And that might be what your lines look like. But see, it's not that smooth and fast. But if I use my elbow and shoulder to draw, then boom, I can get much straighter lines. So this is one of the reasons I always recommend people, use your arm to draw. Because it's just easier. You get stuff like that down. So anyway, I go across and I look for points. So one point is, so this, first of all, this initial guide is basically saying what is the top and the lowest and the highest points. And then you want to look at the corners. So where's the corner? So in this one, the corner is here. So I carry that over and I put the corner there. And see, we've already got the eye socket in, so roughly you've got a guide of where this eye is going to fit. And then we've got the top part connecting up here, and you've got this angle. See here? This is an angle, and this would be this, the angle of this, or the angle of this. And then you do the opposite, right? So like that. So then if I get this angle, then it would be that. And then you get this corner right here, or right here, and get that across, and then connect that, and look at how wide this is, and draw that wide. And usually there's an eye width in between the eyes, and bring that swoop down, and there. So now I've got 2 similar sized eyes, and I can do the same for the eyebrow. Bring this across, and then see, okay, so where is this in relation, like where is this corner in relation to the corner of the eye? Well, it's a little bit in front, like that, closer to the nose. So, boom, go across, see where that is, a little bit in front, put it there. And then where's the top point? Right there. Get that in, and then the bottom is right there. And that has that curve, so this gets it, that curve. And there, so that's how I find the placement of the eyes. Alright, now the same thing that applies to the eyes applies to the mouth. So if I want to make sure the mouth is even, and just find the corners of the mouth, and I go across and I find the other corner of the mouth, and that's that. And what else? Another thing that people kind of have a problem with, but I wouldn't say it's a proportion mistake. It's not even really a mistake. It's just a way of thinking, and that is to understand that when you do this, like, okay, so here's the bottom of the face, right? This. And the thing is to think of it like it's the way I just did it, which is flat. And it's not, because if you really think about it, okay, here's a chin, right? So put your hand on your chin and notice how far forward it is. And then when you go back here to the back of the jaw, this is really close to where your ear is, which is further back, like a lot further back than your chin. So when I draw, what I try to do is I usually darken it at the chin area and then sort of fade off as I go that way, because this is going back in space, and then at this point this line is not going to be as defined as this line. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. It's a minor thing, but it's the same thing as, I don't know, when you draw like a tree, right? If you just draw things like this, it's like, wow, this is a tree, and then you might have branches and stuff. And that's one way of going about it. But if you start to really think about a tree, think about how a tree feels, imagine running your hand over the trunk of a tree, then, at least for me, when I draw, thinking that my line takes on this different feel. See, it's sort of like bumpy, like a tree bark texture. So I find the same thing when I think of this being further back in space than this. And you could do the same with the mouth, where it's sort of wrapped around on this muzzle shape, right? And I do get that what I'm drawing right now is very much in my own style. Sorry, the more I draw, the more it's like hard to get out of my style, but let's just do the same thing with a bit more of a squared off chin. So the same thing applies. You'll notice when I draw, as I get closer to the chin, I define that more, and as I get closer to the back of the jaw, I lose, or I loosen up on how hard I press. And another way of thinking of it is you can get this area of the cheekbone, and you can bring that towards the front, like so. It's easier on this squared off face. You can sort of get this going, and then this part is facing towards us, right? Like this is sort of facing, this is one plane, and it's, if you put your hand on it, it's sort of flat. I mean, you got your mouth muzzle thing we talked about going around, and then this part goes back in space, and so that creates like the planes of the face, and this part is coming back in space as well, and then this is more flat again, and then this is going back, and then your eye sockets are sort of on this flat plane, right? Like all this is more flat. So it's another way of just thinking. When you change how you think, you change how you draw. They tend to go hand in hand. So the other thing is then, with that in mind, when you draw the ears, it's another issue. It's that you don't want to just be tacking them on the side of a flat plane, right? Like if I just draw this and this, it's almost like you just pasted this flat ear on the side of this flat face. But you don't want to be thinking that way. You want to be thinking that this is going back in space and then this ear is back in space and it's bending back like that. Like if you view it from a side view, it might look, the ear might look something like this in a side view. But then when you turn it towards us, it takes on this. Like you'll start to see this top part and then it comes around. So this thing changes to this type of shape with an overlap. And then you have that like flappy part. And in this, this part right here tends to be hidden behind the ear flap part. And then this goes around like that. And so you see how the shape changes because it's facing towards us, right? So you want to get that when you draw the ears. And people's ears are different. Like, of course, you can have ears that are a bit more curved outwards like that. But it's still usually more, I don't know, diagonal than in the pure side view. So you get that. And you can do the same to the other side. And again, you just carry it over, right? Carry over lines, find where these things meet on the other side and just redraw it. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. Again, mileage. And then the other thing is this cranium part, right? So all this, in keeping with what is in front of the other thing, that you don't just want, you know, a shape that is a flat shape. You want to feel the depth. This part goes behind the ear. So this part of the jaw right here comes in front of the ear. So this is in front, but this goes behind the ear. And you can also indicate that by lightly easing up. So you go around the cranium, and this part is further back in space than this part, because this is the front of the chin, right? But the front of the forehead is around here. This is the top of the head, right? So when you touch here, it's roughly in the middle, but it's much further back than this area. So let's say there's a guy and he had a horn. Well, you're probably not going to make the horn up here. If it was supposed to be coming out of the forehead, it would be around here, right? So anyway. So we start at the top of the head. Again, this is less hard than I would for this, because this is closer towards us. And then I'm easing up as I go behind this ear. And it's a minor thing again. And I can also shade this a little bit because this is a different plane. But as you do these things and have this in mind, your drawings become a lot more three-dimensional than maybe someone else's who is not thinking of these things. Another thing you want to think about is the temple. So we drew the eye socket, and then there is a bone that comes around, and then you've got the temple, which is in this area. So you can indicate that as well if you want. And it's not necessary, it's just, again, it's additional information. And something I like to do with the temple is just to think of it as you have, use a darker color, you have this part coming down around the eye, right? Then you have the eye socket here. So now I'm thinking more in terms of like a skull. You have this, and you have the eye socket, and then you have this cheekbone, and this whole thing is sort of connected, and then this comes around. So I don't know if that makes sense, but this comes around like this, and you've got this. So this is why it's important to think of the skeleton, because you need to be able to fit any head. You need to have a skull that fits in it, right? Even a caricatured head needs to be able to house a skull. Even an anime face, you need to be able to have a skull that holds that stuff. So it's important to study skulls and things. And you'd have the teeth here. So yeah. So, I mean, there's more I can talk about. Maybe I'll cover in another tutorial the jaw and how to move the jaw, how to open and shut it, how the mouth works. But I think for the front view anyway, I covered most of the common mistakes that I see. Fix that skull, because that's not exactly how it would be. But anyway, yeah, I hope it helps you with some of these common mistakes. Keep in mind, the eyes and how it's made up of these 4 lines, and how to practice these straight horizontal lines that are parallel. You can fill up a page doing this. You can also do this exercise where you put down 2 dots, you ghost over, and you try and connect them. Ghost, 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 and try and connect those. And then what else? Yeah, paying attention to how the eyebrow, there's a rhythm to it. It swoops around the eye, and then you get into the eyebrow. And it doesn't have to be this severe. Like, this is pretty exaggerated. Maybe more like this is a bit more accurate. And then the ears and the jaw, and paying attention to how certain things come in front of other things and other things go behind. And it will, if you think about it, I'm pretty sure it'll change how you draw and how much pressure you put down. So hope that helped, and thanks for watching.